Hi, Eric. Can you hear me?
Hello, Dr. Mo. How you doing?
Yeah, good. So good to see you.
Likewise.
Sorry about the delay. I'm just gonna make sure that the Reddit crowd is live as well. If you give me like 2 seconds.
Sure, no problem.
All right, we are live. So thank you so much, Eric. Thank you for taking a few minutes from your busy life, to come talk to us today.
Dr. Mo, how you doing? Nice to
Good.
be here with everybody. It's not just me who has a busy life, everybody's got one. So thank you for taking the time, and who's ever plugged in, thank them for taking the time too.
Yeah, so thank you everyone who is joining us on this webinar today on Reddit. If you have any questions, please feel free to post it on the AMA, which has gone live since yesterday. So Eric, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, my bio material is probably easily available on the web, so I'll tell you a little bit about the person, which is not my bio. I'm just a regular person, regular guy like everybody else. Got 2 sons I'm very proud of, 2 dogs, 1 wife. I live in New Jersey on a farm, travel when I can. Had a lot of fun, and it's been an interesting ride with the Spac with a couple of real good partners, and with a market that's been very interesting, as I know most of the Redditors are all too familiar with.
For sure. Tell me a little bit about this farm that you have.
Well, for those people who are not familiar with New Jersey, they're probably not going to put New Jersey and farm in the same sentence, but it's in Western New Jersey up in the north. About 25 miles from Pennsylvania, about 45 miles from New York City. And it's a place that's been in my family for 15 or 16 years. And my wife and I, when I left the NFL, decided to spend some more time here. And so we have fun doing things that you might imagine. No animals here, but got some hay and a sawmill, and we grow vegetables and fruit and a bunch of other things, and we eat it and we give it away. So no sales here.
That's beautiful. I totally believe in that kind of slow life. My wife and I both also live on a hobby farm here in Iowa, and I appreciate where your thoughts are coming from, and I can relate to them. You said you have 2 dogs. What kind of dogs are they?
I have German Shepherds, Chester and Mabel, and
Okay.
so I think it's my 6th and 7th German Shepherds through the years, and they're great dogs, and they're just pets. They're not crazy trained or anything like that. And as you might imagine, they like the farm.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, for sure.
And interestingly enough, this farm has served multiple purposes, including being a great place for me and my family during COVID. And I wish other people had places like this to be when the times were tough and dark, and maybe people were cramped. But we also launched SEAH from here. There was no business travel, and John Collins flew up, and from the farm we did 61 investor calls and raised the money. Wow. And where we also did our targeting exercise, and where we ultimately were introduced via Zoom to the management team of Supergroup, and got to know them on dozens and dozens and dozens of calls. So this place for me is a place to live and love, but it was also a place to launch a business, and I'll always remember it for that.
Yeah, it's basically your base, your base of operation.
It's been my base. That's right. I had to have somewhere, and there was no business travel, and you couldn't be in an office, and so this is where I did it.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's funny how 2019, 2020, COVID has changed a lot of how we practice business, meetings, even medicine. Like I got COVID, unfortunately, and I had to quarantine for a couple of weeks at home, but I still saw my patients over Zoom. So that
I
was
don't know how
interesting.
many of the people who are on here and follow you know that you're also a practicing oncologist, and you probably saw some really interesting and troubling things during COVID. I know everybody in the medical community did,
Yeah,
and
it
so
was.
hats off to you.
Oh, thank
Kudos for
you.
being there for people.
Yeah, it's been an interesting year. It was a quick learning curve because I just graduated about a year and a half ago. But enough about me. How about you? You were part of the NFL. Tell me a little bit more about that. How did you even get involved in that?
Well, in the the mid 90s, I was sitting on the floor of Goldman Sachs Mergers and Acquisitions Department in the bullpen in a cubicle. And the person who hands out the assignments came out of his office and said, I need a volunteer to go do something tomorrow. Of course, nobody raised their hands. Everybody was working 100 hours a week and didn't want to volunteer for anything extra. But to make a long story short, I went in and talked to him. And a colleague of ours had been diagnosed with cancer and had to get off all of his assignments. And I took 2 of those assignments, each of which formed an interesting, began to form an interesting series of events in the development of my career over the next 10 to 20 years. One of them was the defense of a utility called Portland General out in Portland, Oregon, against a hostile takeover attempt by Enron, which was a high flyer of the day. And the other was the sale of a struggling NFL franchise called the New England Patriots. And it was that transaction that led to Robert Kraft and his family buying the Patriots and led to me being involved in sports. One thing led to another. I ultimately was elected a partner of Goldman Sachs. It was still a private company back then. And I went to become the co-head of the energy business with a man named David Lucian. And I also took the sports business, which we built up into a nice, focused group of people who would work on league activities and well-known franchises. And so that led to me knowing a lot of people in sports and in particular to the NFL. And so years later, when I was available and hadn't decided what to do, took a call from Commissioner Tagliabue, and one thing led to another, and I landed at the NFL.
It's amazing how those small things in life, it's like we can plan our lives, as much as we want, but there's those little things like you volunteering, that got you to where you are and defined a lot of the past 15, 20 years of your life, that's amazing. And I looked at your CV. It looks like you graduated from the Naval College.
United States Naval Academy, yes. And I will, first of all, any of the listeners, any of the participants who are in service of any kind, I want to thank you for your service. And I'll also acknowledge for any of those who know anything about the Navy that that there's a joke that Navy stands for never again volunteer yourself. So I violated that one. But you know what? A lot of people in service volunteer over and over and over again through their lives for one thing or another. And it's something we should all do.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, thank you for your service as well, and all the Redditors out there today who have been part of the service as well. And
not just the military. There are a lot of people in public service or one kind or another, or in churches in their community, and all those people should be recognized because service doesn't pay. It doesn't pay money. It pays in other things. And so anyway, I don't want to get preachy, but I recognize people.
I get it. No, I get it. Like service pays in just having a beautiful community where everybody cares for each other. So tell me about Supergroup. How did you guys get involved with Supergroup that way?
So I got a call from a man named Daniel Burns, who was on the inside as a trusted advisor to the management team and the ownership group of Supergroup, who knew me via Genius Sports. I knew the management team of Genius, and I knew their majority holder, Apex. I had talked to the CEO and other members of the management team of Genius going way back to when I was at the NFL. And through a variety of conversations about things, I got to know Daniel Burns. He's on the board of Genius. And so when I launched the Spac, Daniel's pretty sophisticated in the world of gaming. He runs a boutique called Oakvale, and based in London. So he knew the gaming industry, he knew the SPAC world, and he knew me, and he knew the rules. He knew I couldn't talk while we were going public. So I don't know, a couple of days or a week after we went public, I got a telephone call from Daniel asking would I be interested in taking a look at a gaming company that was global, that was not well known, that was big and extremely profitable. And would I be interested in taking a look? And it took me about 6 nanoseconds to say, yes, I would like to have that conversation.
Of course, yeah, and it has led to this interesting project for sure. So tell me, where's Betway really, like, most of their customers, like, where are they based? I see the European connection, you know, could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, and I'm going to say in advance, both on this Zoom call and on the written, I'm not going to put out any new financial information or any new sensational information that's not already disclosed. Those are the rules of the road, and we don't want to create new filings and so forth and so on. So with that caveat, as people can see in the investor deck, they are truly a global company, much better known outside the United States than inside the United States, with a footprint that includes a variety of places in Europe, the African continent, the Americas. So it really does have a presence around the world, and it has name recognition around the world, including in the United States, even though, as I said and acknowledge, and is in the investor deck, they are just getting started in the United States from the standpoint of direct activity.
Amazing. Yeah, it's interesting how this works. I feel like the globe gets smaller every year, and I don't know, maybe because I spent a lot of time indoors, I'm hearing about more European firms, you know, and international firms are now getting, you know, a foothold in the States. So that's very interesting. So why did you target that Supergroup anyways? You know, there's hundreds of other, well, not hundreds, like dozens of other similar private firms out there.
Well, in our SPAC, when we went public and we told the prospective investors in our IPO the types of things that we thought made sense, at least that we looked at the world, we had a variety of criteria. And I can't from memory go into all of it, but I'll go into the key aspects. We wanted to be in industries that we thought would grow. We wanted to be involved with a company where we could add value, that it wasn't just the cash in trust that's associated with a SPAC.
Sure.
Everybody's cash is in trust is exactly the same. If you got $400 million in trust and somebody else has $400 million in trust, that money is exactly the same. So the differentiation is either in the price you're willing to pay or the value that you can add. And so we decided to stand on our value added. And in regard of the industries that we targeted that we thought were interesting and had growth and where we could add value, they included a variety of things, including media and esports. And one of those industry verticals was gaming. And the pitch to our investors in the gaming industry was that it was really just getting started in America, that it was regulating here, that it was regulating in other parts of the globe, and that we thought it would be an interesting scenario either for young founders to have grizzled veterans or for an international platform to have Americans. And so that really was our pitch, and that was one of the things that was in our mind. The other thing that was in our mind, and we were pretty candid about this, and we were asked directly on the roadshow, would we do a venture capital type of SPAC deal? And we said that it was unlikely, that while we respected people who were doing that, and this was certainly a market we could do it, we preferred something that had the business model had already merged and the profit model was obvious. And that while we would go into something that was choosing to direct its profits into growth and therefore didn't show a lot of cash flow, we would be uncomfortable in this SPAC with something that did not have real heft as it related to balance sheet and growth and earnings and EBITDA and so forth and so on. So Supergroup,
Right.
when you overlay what does Supergroup have against that criteria that was in our IPO, it was a really good fit.
Yeah, it seems like it, you know. It's funny, that word EBITDA, that's something I had to learn in the past 16 months. I'm not in finance, I'm in medicine. And I was like, how do you pronounce this? I had to go to YouTube and go through a video, you know, how it's pronounced. But it makes sense, you know, the term really conveys a metric that can be used easily when you're comparing different private firms.
And I think
So
you've learned it well, because I understood, did I understand correctly that you and some colleagues have 20 Spacs to follow that are based on criteria, and multiple portions of the criteria go to the value chain, which includes
100%.
EBITDA, cash flow. Yeah.
Exactly.
I hope we get in that 20 at some point, Dr. Mo.
Yeah, we'll be looking and carefully following. So taking a slight pivot, you know, how is Supergroup similar and different from DraftKings? We saw DraftKings go public earlier this year, and was it, or late last year? Anyways, they did really well, and we were wondering if you can like list the differences and similarities from what you can see from your perspective.
Well, I'm not going to pretend to know know DraftKings inside and out, but I will acknowledge that I've known DraftKings and its founder for years, going all the way back to them pitching a variety of associations related to fantasy to the NFL, and I was in the room on that pitch, all the way to mid-cycle when was working on the project to really understand the gaming industry for the NFL before PASPA was taken up by the Supreme Court, and talked to DraftKings and its founder about how he saw the world developing. And then after PASPA, continuing those conversations. So I have a tremendous respect for what they did, how they thought about the world, and how they took advantage of changes and took advantage of them very rapidly. When you compare DraftKings to Supergroup, anybody can compare the obvious metrics, and so I won't bother to do that. They're really very different in their construct, in that Supergroup is a relatively more mature in its model. I don't mean that in its growth or its aspirations, but in its model, Supergroup is relatively more mature. It's been at it for a longer period of time. It's got the global footprint and the profit metrics of a more mature company, and is pursuing growth around the world based on wherever the return on investment is attractive, and markets that are regulating, and therefore new markets that are opening up. And so it's coming to the United States. DraftKings at the moment is based on an American and America's, I should say, growth model, which is in high growth mode because of the Supreme Court decision and things opening up state by state very rapidly. So Supergroup is really mature, continuing to go after growth and having growth opportunities around the world from which it can choose where to deploy capital. Whereas, as I see it, DraftKings has a very strong base in America, which is high growth, and they're going to use that high growth in America to avail themselves of other opportunities as they see them come about. And again, as I said, I think twice, I have a tremendous respect for the founder and the team that built that, and I fully expect that that we'll see new and interesting things from DraftKings, just as I fully expect we'll see new and interesting things from Supergroup. Yeah,
like you mentioned, the key thing I've noticed is Supergroup was more international, more mature, while DraftKings was more America-based, you know, but seeing the success they had, I definitely can see great success here in North America as well for Supergroup. Going forward, you know, you might not, if this question is difficult to answer, it's okay if we skip it. What companies do you see as direct competitors, you know, as you pivot and come to this market in the United States?
I really like that question because I think what I'm about to say may surprise people. I believe that iGaming is very competitive all over the world. I believe sports betting is very competitive all over the world. And I think that the people that Supergroup competes with run the across the spectrum from the more specific Americas based to the global, from the smaller to the larger. And I think the key success factors are the obvious ones, the customer acquisition, the service to the customer, and whether it is entertaining. And that word is where it's, I think I'm going to take it where people don't expect. I don't see the medium to long term as a pure competition among the gaming companies. I see it as competition in the entertainment side, broader than just gaming. In other words, there's only 24 hours in the day, and a small subset of those hours in a given week are spent on entertainment. And that entertainment, whether it's in gaming, or meaning iGaming, or video games, or watching games, or playing games, or fill in the blank, you can see where I'm going, listening to music, going to concerts, whatever it is, that's the total addressable market. And the best minds that I see are going to, or either are looking at it that way or are going to look at it that way. And so when we talk to Supergroup, the way they hone in on the customer is from the iGaming and the sports gaming, sports book, but it's also what makes that platform really interesting to the customer. And so they have to be very creative and attentive to that. And that's why I think of the competition, the landscape of competition, to be broader than just the gaming and iGaming industries.
That's remarkable, actually. That's very interesting. You know, I have younger siblings, and I'm kind of keeping an eye on what they're doing. And it seems like they're getting more involved in huge gaming that's online, you know, maybe South Korea based, with a lot of different players, and they pay subscription into this. It'll be interesting to see what Supergroup does, you know, as they place their foothold here.
I'm not comparing myself to Jeff Bezos, and I'm not comparing Supergroup to Amazon, but I'm going to pose the question that I think makes this area of thinking pretty obvious. Does anyone think that Jeff Bezos and Amazon thought of themselves as a bookseller 20 years ago? No. They thought of it, they had to be thinking of it as the means by which they launch into a much, much broader TAM, total addressable market.
Sure.
And that's how all of these companies that we see come out of nowhere to be gigantic think of it. And so again, I go back to, I don't want to be bragging about Supergroup in two ways. First is we didn't find it. Daniel Burns found me. And second, we didn't build that company. The management team and the ownership built it. Yeah, I have to give them tremendous credit. But when they think about it, when they talk about it, as the investors who got a direct investor presentation, they're going to get what John Collins and I got, which is the people who think about this in a highly focused manner, but also an expansive manner. They really think about what is good, fun, interesting, and safe, and then they go to great lengths to deliver that.
You know, that's super important. You know, looking through all the Spacs and the companies, they must have a product that is desirable, something, an idea or something that they're selling in order for them to succeed. We really truly believe in that. And I think that's a great point. And it's good that you raised it up, you know, and we'll see how the market responds to that for sure. Going forward, what's the timeline for merger completion and ticker change?
It's a little bit uncertain because the key step in beginning the clock is the completion of an audit, which is underway. So once that audit is completed, then things start to fall into place, which the major variable after the audit is how long does the registration process with the SEC go? That, you know, that can be a bit uncertain. So the best I can do is say it's obviously the second half, because we're already almost in the second half, but you know, somewhere around the end of the third, beginning of the fourth. But again, I don't want to be held to that, because we can't really get more precise until the audit is done.
Yeah, that's fair. You know, it's bureaucracy, right? It takes some time. So is there anything we haven't talked about? Because we'll soon transition to the AMA live on Reddit. Anything else you'd like to talk about before we get to that?
No, well, there's lots of things I like to talk about, but I'm sure the investing public doesn't really care. So,
well, thank you so much, Eric. You know, it was great having you today. Getting a lot of questions. I'm just reading them as I talk to you, and looking forward for you and your team answering these questions for us. And we really appreciate your time.
Well, then let's do pick one or two of the questions so that I can get a head start.
Sure. Let me load it up. See what the top question is.
Let's be responsive to the people who took the time to dial in.
Yeah. Let's see what the top question is. You're the grub man. I don't know what that means.
I've been called worse.
You've been called worse. Okay. So this question is here. SPAC sentiment is at all-time low. One reason for that is the failure of recent combined businesses to live up to their projections made in their respective investors' presentations. Why should investors believe Supergroup won't follow down the familiar SPAC path of overpromising and under-delivering in their first earnings report as a public company?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I would say SPACs in many respects, and the companies that are merging with SPACs, you end up getting, by the investing public, get held to the same standard of every other company. So I think what you really have to look at is when a company makes projections, whether it's Supergroup or anyone else, are they basing those projections off a track record which is easily understood, and therefore people can have a certain level of confidence in the projection, or are they not easily understood? Is there a track record, and I don't mean a management track record, is a track record of the business model? And so I'm not going to say anything about confidence level or anything of that nature, because I'm not allowed to. But I will say then when we looked at Supergroup and we did our due diligence, a lot of our questions were oriented towards how do you make projections, and what are your models like, and show us your models, and let's see what the variables are, and then let's stress test some of those models. So I can't give promises. I think whoever asked that question is asking a really good one. But you know, SPACs are a tool, and a tool in the right hands is a good tool. A tool in the wrong hands is maybe not such a good tool, right? A scalpel in the wrong hands or a chainsaw in the wrong hands, but in the right hands. So we're just going to do the best we can, and I would just say, you know, my money is in the same place as the investor's money. It's in this deal. Yeah.
So having you know, part of you invested really helps, because it shows that you have a vested interest for sure. So last question, what is Betway's largest market in terms of revenue?
I'm not going to go to disclosure beyond the investor deck, so I'll just leave it at that. There's a pie chart in the investor deck that gives the regions, and I'll leave it at that.
Fair enough. So for everybody attending from Reddit, I'm going to attach the investor deck to the top of the AMA, and also Eric's background and profile. So that will be it, Eric. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. We're going to go live now onto Reddit and continue our conversation there.
Okay, thank you. Thanks everybody for dialing in. See you all later.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.